The people in the days of the Bible were very familiar with the picture of pastures with sheep and shepherds. One of the main ways that people made their living, fishing, farming, and shepherding in the Middle East. Old Testament, New Testament, God would sometimes use that analogy of shepherding to speak even of leaders of God's people. And today I want to look at Jesus being the shepherd. Jesus is the good shepherd. He's different than all the other shepherds. He's somebody who expresses his leadership, his care, his concern, his love for people by what he did, the way he lived, and what he was willing to give up in order to bless other people. And that's one of the things we remember each day. We come together on a Sunday to, even around the Lord's table, remember the sacrifice that Jesus made for us. Now, I not only want to talk about Jesus being the good shepherd, maybe we could talk about us being a shepherd as well. So sometimes we talk about elders in the church or as shepherds in the church. Or maybe even in families. Maybe if you're a father, you're really a shepherd of your family. You're a leader. As we talk about these qualities that Jesus had, that's what we are to be if we're going to be shepherds. Or maybe you're a mother, shepherding over your family, over your children, over the people that you know and the relationships you have. Maybe you're a teacher, a Bible class teacher. Or maybe you're a teacher in the school system. In a way, at least for a while, you're a shepherd of other people. You lead and guide, encourage. You try to bless them and help them. And you're willing to give of yourself in order to help them that they may mature and grow and learn, develop. Some of the principles we talk about, we could even apply to the business model. If you are a leader at work, if you're a manager, if you're working with people, you could imagine what kind of qualities it would take to be a really good leader. Not only going to school, you could say, well, an MBA may help, or some management courses on the side would help a little bit, but what kind of person would really be an effective leader? And as we look at Jesus, not only do we see what he did, but we see a model that he left for us when we think about our own roles and responsibilities. So we want to talk about today the Good Shepherd, what Jesus is, what Jesus did and continues to do for us even today. He still works on our behalf. He still serves us. He's still there for us. He's still there to be with us through the difficult times of life and challenges. As we were singing that song, In Heavenly Love Abiding, the last verse just speaks about no matter what happens in our life, whether it's a stormy day, whether it's a difficult time, and it even talks about, you want to know something? I know there's green pastures before us that I've never seen. Well, how do you know that? You never seen them. How do you know? Because I know the shepherd. I know the one who's leading. I know what kind of person he is. He's not going to take me out to the barren land, out to the desert where we're going to be exposed in heat and die. That's not what he's about. He's about giving life. Oh, but what if Jesus doesn't know where the green pastures are? Oh, well, Jesus is the one who knows everything. He's very familiar with the lay of the land. He's been here before. He's been this way. As a matter of fact, he even knows the future. So he's got it all figured out. So what do? I trust him. And I say, yeah, it may be challenging now. There may be some storms. There may be some difficulties. But I'm going to keep going through because he has built the relationship. And that's really what it is to be a Christian. To say, I'm willing to trust my life, to trust my everything, to trust my soul, to trust my heart. That's sometimes difficult, isn't it? Because we say, well, I got these doubts, I got fears, I got concerns. What if? But we say, no, Jesus has always shown himself to be trustworthy. I'm going to trust him. And it doesn't always seem clear in the moment, does it? You ever been through some difficult times? It just, where are we going to go through here? How's it going to work out? Am I ever going to be free from this? Well, the question is difficult. But the answer is to trust. And I know sometimes that's difficult as well. But let's look at some of these qualities that Jesus had as we talk about the relationships even that we have with each other. It says there in John chapter 10 and verse 3, and again, Jesus here is talking about he is the one who is the good shepherd. So that's kind of important for us to remember. Jesus is the good shepherd. It was actually prophesied even from the Old Testament. In Ezekiel chapter 34, there God is looking down on the people of Israel, and he's saying, the leaders of the people are supposed to be shepherds, but they don't care about the people. They're shepherds who take everything for themselves. They take advantage of the sheep. They use the sheep, right, for their own gain, for their own personal benefit, for their own advancement. It's sort of about using people. But here it talks about Jesus. Initially, as God is the gatekeeper, he opens. The sheep hear his voice. It's interesting. The sheep hear his voice. They recognize his voice. He calls his own sheep by name, and he leads them out. So one thing I see in this verse is this good shepherd is going to spend a lot of time with the sheep. Right? I mean, when you were a child, and maybe you got separated from your parents, and eventually your parents were looking for you, and they're calling out for you. And when the parents heard, or when they called out, the child would hear the voice. And they wouldn't think, whose voice is that? That doesn't, It's like, no, that's my mom and dad. Now, there may be somebody else who's calling out. It may be very noisy, but it's like, I know I can go through this whole auditorium. You're not my dad. You're not my dad. You're not my mom. You're not my dad. You're not my mom. So I hear your voice, and it's like, big deal. But when my mom calls my voice, hopefully it's like a nice, Peter, not like, bah! Anyway, so she uses her voice, but man, I know the voice. Good, bad, or ugly, but I hear the voice. And I recognize it. Why? Apparently we spent a little bit of time together, right? Yeah. We've gotten to know each other. So that's what a shepherd does. He is with the people. He knows the people. So again, this is what Jesus did for us. He came from heaven, and he didn't really come to heaven just so he could know us. Because guess what? He knew us before he even came. I mean, I think part of the reason he came is not so that he would know us. It may be because I want to know that he knows that I know that he knows me. Right? In other words, it's maybe for my benefit to say, like, Jesus came into this world, and he lived among us, and he could relate to us, and he was with us, and he went through some of the same challenges and struggles. He went through the temptations and the trials, the rejection, even the fears of life. He knows what that is like to be tempted in that way, because he's been through it. But he also knew what it was like before he came, because obviously, he's been watching the world since it began, since people have lived here. He knows what we go through. And so he can relate to us. But Jesus came and lived among us. So he knows us. He wants to be close. He wants us to trust him. So let's put it back into, this is what Jesus was willing to do, to sacrifice everything that he had to come down here to become one of us. Well, what are we to do then? I mean, if we're going to be good shepherds in the home, or in a Bible class, or in the church, or even at work, to know the people. Because you know what it's like to be at work, to have a boss that he doesn't really know you. He doesn't care about you. He's kind of standoff, and he can't relate to you at all. And so you may be going through a struggle. Maybe it's actually a work struggle, but maybe it's a more personal struggle. But he has no idea what you're going through, so what do you think? He just doesn't understand me. He doesn't get it. He doesn't go through what I go through. And so I'm feeling that there's no understanding. And when there's no understanding, a lot of times there's no trust. But it can happen the same way in a home, can't it? If a parent is too busy to spend time with their spouse or with their children, right? And I know that, some of us have to go to work, or some of us are in school, or some of us are doing different things. But, we can't ignore the responsibility of being with the people we love, being with the people we're trying to lead, being with the people we're trying to shepherd, because it's got to do with relationship. So you can't do it from afar. You can't do it without being personally involved. And that takes time. And maybe sometimes that takes sacrifice. But in a way, it's not real sacrifice. Because for Jesus, it was like, this is something I want to do. Jesus used, in this reading, we're not going to look at all the verses, but Jesus used this example that there's two things that can destroy this flock of sheep. So again, just think about the shepherd himself, like a real shepherd, taking care of sheep. When an enemy comes, it could be a wolf, it could be a bear, it could be a lion, that speaks about that in the Old Testament. It could be a predator, somebody coming in to steal sheep. But when an enemy comes in, that can destroy the sheep. Maybe one at a time, maybe all of them. Part of the problem is when that kind of enemy comes in, it says the sheep scatter. They leave. They get separated. They run their own way. And you understand it. They're running for their life. But what do you think happens to sheep when they're alone? Safe or not safe? Yeah, they're not safe at all. Really, a shepherd can't really shepherd sheep when they're all over the place. I mean, you could imagine, if somebody had 20 acres and the sheep were all over the land, and you got one shepherd. He's like, I don't even know where to start. So the sheep need to stay together. But an enemy can come and destroy the sheep, and part of the way it destroys is by separating. That's why the Bible speaks about Christians. They get together. You know what they're called? A church. They're called a family. They're called a fellowship. They're people together. And I know I've heard people say, well, I can be a Christian all on my own. I don't need anybody. For a lot of people that I know have done that, they're no longer Christians. Let's just put it that way. To be honest, no longer Christians. And the few people that have remained that still stay isolated, I can guarantee you one thing, they are not all that God has called them to be, because you can't do it on your own. You need people, right? You need people where you can be encouraged, you can be helped, you can be instructed. But you also have an opportunity to help others, to encourage, to teach, to feed, to lead, to help other people grow. And that's what God's calling us to, but being together. So the one thing that destroys the flock is predators. But the second thing that destroys the flock are shepherds sometimes. But it's not the true shepherd, it's not the good shepherd. It's what, as was read in the scripture, again, we're not going to talk about all the details. The other challenge is the hireling, right? I mean, some of us have been hired to do a job, especially if it's a job, it's only temporary. It's not going to be your career. You're just taking this job on. It's not really a job you want, but you do need money. So you're going to work and you're going to do a job. You're a hireling. You may not really care if the company's successful. You may not really care if you're actually participating and creating and doing and acting the way they want you to. You just show up, you do your time, and when it's time to check out, you're done. You leave, you go home. It's finished. Well, you got to come back the next day. But you're a hireling. If anything happened in there, you wouldn't really care. It's not your business, it's not your concern. I'm just here to do a job and get paid. That's it. But a real shepherd, that's not the picture of a hireling. It's somebody who's completely committed. So another analogy to somebody who's completely committed may be a parent. A parent. Now, do you know some parents, and maybe you're that kind of parent too, that say, well, I'm an 8-hour parent. It's 9 to 5. 5 o'clock, I'm checked out. Somebody else is taking care of the kids. I'm done, right? My kids take care of themselves. I mean, when they're older, it's cool. But you don't generally do that when you've got 2, 3, and 5-year-olds in the house. You don't say, well, because what kind of job is that? It's not because you're hired to do it. It's because this is your calling. This is your ministry. This is what you are to be, is to be a parent. And that's a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week job. And it may not always be enjoyable, right? Does anybody remember 3 o'clock in the morning, kids are sick, and they're throwing up all over the bathroom? Yeah, you may not remember that because they didn't make it to the bathroom. They threw up everywhere else. And, but, so what do you say? Well, sorry, I'm off the clock now. You're going to have to clean it up yourself, right? No. Is it fun? Not necessarily, but it's what you've been called to do. That's the difference between a hireling and somebody who is a good shepherd. They care for the sheep. What does that mean? Well, we'll kind of continue on because I could ramble for some time about this. Been thinking about it too much, I guess. But ultimately what we're saying is to be a good shepherd, you got to be near. You got to be involved. You've got to be close. You got to know the sheep, right? So you got to be near. But the second thing that we see about the shepherd is in verse 4. When he's brought out all of his own, the people that he's shepherding, the people he's responsible for. Back then, oftentimes, sheep would get together in a pen, maybe at night, and there'd be several flocks there. But as the shepherd's leaving, he could call out, and his sheep, his own sheep, would follow him. The sheep that belonged to somebody else would not follow him, and they may go a different direction with their shepherd. So when we hear the call of God, when we hear God telling us to follow, he's leading, we follow because he is our shepherd. But he goes before them, and the sheep follow him because they know his voice. So this is the idea that he is leading. It's a little different picture than many other kinds of animals. A lot of times people talk about driving animals. That means you're from behind and you've got to push them forward. Shepherds don't do this. They lead out front, call them. Sheep hear their voice. They trust them and they lead. The sheep follow. And this is what God has done for us. He's come to be the example. He's come to build trust. He's come to build relationship. He's come to be with us so we trust him. He calls us out. Where does he call us out from? He calls us out from the place where we've lived our whole life. Not physically, but the way we've lived, the way we've thought. We've been very much ingrained in the world. We've been involved in a lot of stuff we shouldn't have been involved in. We've been caught in a lot of trouble. Been involved in sin. Jesus says, I've come to bring you out. So listen to my voice. I'll lead you out. Trust me. And so this is another thing the shepherd does. He leads because the sheep recognize his voice. That's important that we would be open to that. What kind of leaders are we then? Whether it be in the church or in the home, maybe even in the business world. Are we people that can be trusted? People that are trustworthy? People that others would look to and say, I'm going to follow them because they've been an example. They've been a leader. They've been faithful. They've been true. They've kind of got a track history. That's the kind of person Jesus is. And so we follow his voice. So the first one, or the second one here is hear. Not only to be near, but now we are willing to hear. We're willing to trust him. He's got a distinctive voice that we recognize and we follow him. So the third point of this shepherd, the good shepherd, in John chapter 10, verse 11, Jesus says, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for his sheep. And this is quite unlike kind of the business model in the world. Because people say in the world, maybe sometimes even in the home, maybe sometimes even in the church, people would say, well, if you want to lead, you take control, you take power, you take a position, you use your authority, right? And Jesus kind of addressed that in Matthew chapter 20. He talks about, the leaders of the Gentiles, in other words, the leaders of the world, they exercise their authority. In other words, they flex their muscle, they use their talk, they may threaten people. They don't take advantage of their position. Instead, they decide to lead based on who they are. So the idea is this shepherd lays down his life for sheep. And this is the thing that's one of the things that's hardest for me to understand. That Jesus didn't come in as a king, a powerful leader among the people, and basically beat everybody into submission or threatened everybody into submission. He just came as one who serves. And that's what Jesus said in Matthew 20. Don't be like the Gentiles. Don't be like the world. If you want to lead, you have to serve. What does that mean? If we're going to serve like Jesus, what did Jesus do? He gave up everything. Gave up everything. Even in this chapter, it talks about that several times, this idea. He lays down his life. He lays down his life. Not a long Greek lesson. But this life is not physical life. He did lay down his physical life, but that's not this life that he laid down. So physical life is kind of zoe, right? This is a physical life. This word is more like the word we use, psyche. Psyche. He laid down his everything, right? He just wasn't willing to die. He gave up himself, like the inner self. He was willing to humble himself, to sacrifice himself. In other words, to be completely humiliated. I mean, that's hard, isn't it? I mean, think about that. You know, I'm a man, I'm a father, and I'm a husband. So to think about the way I'm going to lead my family means when I'm leading, it's got nothing to do with me. It's got nothing to do with my ego. It's got nothing to do with my position or my power. It's got nothing to do with I'm getting my way. Well, because you had your way last time, I get my way this time. No, it's not about that. Because you remember Jesus, he did that, didn't he? It's like, you get your way now, I'm taking my way next time. No, he didn't do that. What did he give up? He gave up everything. And I know what you'd say, because I say the same thing. But if I did that, you know, people are going to take advantage of me. And when I think like that, I think, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to take this complaint I have. If I'm really going to lay down my life, and people are going to take advantage of me, I got an idea. I'm going to go tell Jesus about that. Because he's going to be like, yeah, you don't let people take advantage of you. Remember Jesus when he stood up that way? You remember, read through the Gospels sometime and think about this. When did Jesus ever stand up for himself? Never. When did he stand up for other people? Yes, he did. When did he stand up for what was right, for God? Yes, he did. But he never said, I've got my rights and I'm going to do that. I mean, one example would be when Jesus was being tempted after 40 days of not eating or drinking. Can anybody imagine 40 days? 40 hours. Some of us struggle with 40 minutes of not eating or drinking. 40! So he's hungry. Which, again, is interesting. One of the biggest understatements of the Bible. A little hungry. He's very hungry. I mean, literally weak, hungry. So Satan says, we'll turn the stones into bread. Who here would fault Jesus for doing that? But he didn't. Why didn't he? Because he's saying, my life is not about me. My life is about doing God's will. And I'm going to listen to God. That's what we would do. We'd say, I'm willing to sacrifice everything for the flock. I'm willing to die for the flock. And not just, again, die physically, and sometimes it's harder to die every day for people than it is to actually just physically die. Like, okay, put me out of my misery. I die now. Go to heaven. I'm happy with that. I don't want to sound too negative or, people think that's morbid. It's like, well, that's mortality, right? But it's hard to die every day. Die to myself. Die to my own needs, my own desires, my own wants, my own rights. So think about that, parents. Well, if you're a child, think about that as a child. Or if you're a student, or you're a teacher, or you're in business, or you're a neighbor, or you're a church member. Think about, what am I willing to give up? What am I willing to stand up for? Like Paul even says, why don't you just be wronged? I don't like being wronged. I like being right. Oh, just be wronged. It's not a big deal. I mean, because last time I checked, you're dead anyway. Right? What did Paul say? I have been crucified with Christ. I've killed everything off that I've got. I've been crucified with Christ. It's no longer I who live. Christ lives in me. The life I live in this body, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. I died a long time ago. I got nothing in this life that I got to stand up for me. I can stand up for God. I can stand up for others. But this is the idea. Lays down his life for the sheep. And again, in the business model, you go to work and you think your boss is like thinking, he thinks all day long, well, how can I make you as the employee, how can I make you happy? How can I make your life better? How can I make your job easier? How can I maybe even help you in your family life and some of the struggles? And, because I'm not thinking about me, I'm thinking about you. And, we're having raises this year and, I don't need a raise. I mean, I'm already getting $500,000. Why don't you, I want to take a raise, but I just want to give it all to you guys. Right? Anybody work at a place like that? Like, sign me up, right? No, I'm just kidding. It doesn't happen. But that's the Jesus way, because you're thinking about other people. Does that make sense? So, it's hard. It's hard. So we're talking about a true shepherd gives. He's willing to give everything. Like, the giving never stops. Like, you never say, well, I've given enough today. I've sacrificed enough today. I've served enough today. I've done enough today. Right? I'm not saying you need to be obsessive about, how, you don't keep a scorecard, how much have I done or whatever, but you're just available as much as you can be to help and serve and think about other people, not just thinking about our own needs and desires. The last one, John chapter 10, verse 14 and 15. I am the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me, just as the Father knows me, and I know my Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. So Jesus is saying, this is the kind of relationship I want with you. Now, how many people understand this part? Think about it. How well do you think there's the Father, God, Jehovah in heaven, while Jesus was on the earth, the Son of God, the full measure of the Spirit, obeyed God, submitted to God in everything? How well did Jesus know his Father in heaven? 60%, 80%, 90%. I mean, most of us would say maybe 99%. Don't know if he knew everything, but 99%, right? Well, how well did the Father in heaven know Jesus? 100%. Sounds like they're pretty close. But look what Jesus says. I know my own know me, just as. Jesus knows us that well. Now, here's my question. Do you know him very well? And if you don't know Jesus well, that's not his fault. That's not his misgiving. That's not because he doesn't care. That's not because he's not available. That's on me. That's on you. Because he wants me to know him like he knew the Father in heaven. To me, that's pretty close. That's pretty intimate. That's pretty full. That's pretty exclusive. That's how close he wants us to be. So he wants that kind of relationship. And what's Jesus willing to do? He's willing, again, to lay down his life, to go to a cross, to endure pain and suffering, humiliation, mocking, ridicule, lies, false witness, people that hate him, people that are making up stories about him, trying to destroy him so that he could no longer have an influence. He could no longer upset the establishment. But Jesus was willing to go through that. Not only physical suffering, not only emotional suffering, not only mental suffering, but the spiritual part too. He took upon our sins that we could be set free. And that's what many people in the world today think about at Easter, that Jesus died. But then Jesus rose again. Jesus lives. And he lives now so that he can continue to be our shepherd. He lives for us. He lives in us. lives, raised from the dead, so that we too can be raised from the dead. And we can live with God forever. So this sums it up in John chapter 10 and verse 10. The thief comes only to steal and to kill and to destroy. That's literally the physical guy that's coming in to steal the sheep. But he's talking now about Satan, how Satan works sometimes. Satan tries many different ways to destroy the church. We were studying about that in Wednesday night Bible class in the book of Acts. All the different ways, and we're only to chapter 5, but all the different ways that Satan's coming in, trying to destroy, trying to bring the church down, trying to discourage the church, trying to scatter the church. Because if he can scatter the church, he can destroy the church, God's plan will never come about. People will never be saved. We wouldn't even be here today if that was successful. That's what the thief comes to do, to kill, to steal, to destroy. That's why he is so active today, even in the world. Sometimes even amongst Christians. Sometimes even in the church. It's what Satan's trying to do, to destroy everything by scattering. Ultimately, that's what happened when Jesus died. Remember that? Jesus died. Where did the disciples go? They all fled. It almost sounds like they went different directions. They all went to their own homes. They all went to their own caves. They all went to their own place of isolation. They all were in hiding. They were all gone. Except John was at the cross. It's when Jesus died. But you know what happened? Jesus rose from the dead. Changed everything. When Jesus was risen, the disciples, the apostles, got back together. And Jesus said, stay together. Stay in Jerusalem. Wait for the Spirit. Wait for the promise. That's what they did. When they were scattered, they would have died. Jesus says, come back together. I've been risen from the dead. New life, new spirit, new hope, new joy. Together. Jesus says, I've come that they, the sheep, if you're a sheep, that's why Jesus came, so that you can not only have life, but abundant life, a full life, a joy life, a life of purpose and meaning, of direction, a life of strength and peace, a life that makes sense, a life that leads somewhere because you're following the shepherd, a life that takes you to an eternal heaven with the Father. A place of paradise, a place of joy, a place that God's prepared for everyone that follows Jesus. So we talk about the Good Shepherd. Maybe you've never made the commitment to follow the Good Shepherd, to say, Jesus is a good shepherd, but I've not been listening. I've not been following. I've not been doing what he tells me to do. I've been wandering my own way. I've been separated from the other sheep, been kind of lost. Maybe you've never made the decision to follow the Good Shepherd. There's never a better time to make a decision than today, to change your life. And if we can encourage you to say, I want to be a Christian, a follower of Christ, a disciple, someone who's together with God's people, learning and growing, becoming all God wants me to be. If today you want to be baptized into Christ, it's just a sign that you're surrendering your life to Christ. You're buried in the waters of baptism. And in that, you're united in this relationship. Dying to yourself. Buried with Christ. Rise from the water for a new life. Forgiveness of sins and the gift of the Holy Spirit comes through that decision. But if we can encourage you, maybe you want to talk more, maybe you want to study the Bible, we're always here to talk more, to study, to pray together. If we can bless you today, if we can be an encouragement to you, if you want to know more, either speak to us after. We always give an invitation if you want to come now and let your request be known. We're going to stand, we'll sing, Ken will lead us in this song about Jesus, the loving shepherd.